I brought him soft blankets and peanut butter biscuits, sat in his room and talked to him about anything. I told him about the third-grade twins who kept trying to switch places without anyone noticing, about the lunch lady who always slipped me extra cornbread, about the weather, about my dad who used to take me fishing before the divorce, about the way I used to believe every bad thing could be undone if you just tried hard enough. Toy didn't talk, obviously, but he listened in that quiet way only dogs can. By the fourth day, he lifted his head when he saw me. By the fifth, he licked my hand. On the sixth day, I found someone had left a note. It was tucked under a tin of wet food outside his kennel, folded in half. No envelope, just the words, in neat, slanted writing. Please make sure he gets love. I couldn't anymore. I left the toy so he'd know I tried. No name, no other clues. Lacey read it with me and sighed. At least they had some heart. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains the toy, I said. We kept the note in Toy's file, and I kept coming back. He was healing, slowly, gaining weight, getting used to people. Still quiet, but not so empty. I learned he liked music, acoustic guitar especially. He liked when I read books out loud, and he had a soft spot for roast chicken. One rainy afternoon, I sat beside him and asked a question I hadn't dared before. What if I brought you home? Just for a while, just to see. He blinked up at me, tail twitching once. No bark, no jump, but not a no. Lacey helped me sort out the paperwork. Temporary foster status to start. But I knew it wouldn't be temporary. Not really. Toy came home with me that Sunday. He climbed into my back seat without a sound, curled up on the blanket I'd laid out, the blue toy resting beside him. I had washed it 3 times by then, but it still smelled faintly of shelter air and something older. He stepped into my house like it was a museum, cautious, slow, his nails clicking softly against the hardwood. I let him explore, didn't push. That night, he curled up beside the couch, blue toy between his paws, and finally, let out a sigh. It sounded like the first breath of someone who had held it for years. In the days that followed, he began to show pieces of himself I hadn't seen. He liked to watch the birds from the kitchen window. He'd tilt his head when I said certain words. Walk, dinner outside, friend. He was still cautious with strangers, but he didn't hide. The neighborhood kids called him the Quiet King. One day, after the rain, we walked the trail behind my house. Toy stopped near a patch of wildflowers and looked up at me. Then he sat, raised a paw, and let out one soft, deliberate bark. The sound echoed through the trees. He had a voice again, and I knew we were only at the beginning. Toy liked mornings best. The way the sunlight came through the bay window in the living room seemed to pull him out of sleep more gently than any sound ever could. He'd stretch with slow, creaky limbs, lifting his big, shaggy head to blink at the pale gold light like it was something he recognized from a dream. He never barked to wake me, never whined. He just waited until he heard my feet on the stairs, then stood, shook himself once, and padded over to meet me with the soft thump of his tail against the wall. It had been 2 weeks since I brought him home. I was still calling him my foster, officially. Lacey kept asking me if I'd changed my mind about that yet, and I kept saying I needed more time. But every night, I laid an extra blanket down near the foot of my bed. Every grocery run, I bought his favorite treats and the brand of food that didn't make his stomach upset. And every evening, when I walked in from the school and saw him waiting in the hallway with that blue toy between his paws, I felt the quiet answer in my chest. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Toy still didn't make much noise. Even when other dogs barked at us during walks or a car honked too close, he just looked. He had this way of taking in the world, like he was still figuring out if it deserved a reaction. I wondered sometimes if his silence came from the time he spent alone, tied up with nothing but that toy. Or maybe he'd always been like that. Not broken, just quiet. But there were other signs, little things. When I sang while washing dishes, he would come lie at my feet. When I laughed out loud at something, even if he was in another room, he'd come to the doorway and sit. And when I read on the couch, he would rest his head beside me, eyes half closed, like the sound of words was a blanket. One Wednesday afternoon, I brought him with me to the elementary school. It was the end of the day, and I had promised Mrs. Feldman's second-grade class a surprise. Technically, pets weren't allowed, but the principal, Mr. Hardy, had a soft spot for dogs and a softer one for teachers who picked up extra shifts when subs called out last minute. I thought he was dead. That was the first thing out of my mouth when I saw the dog. I didn't mean to say it out loud, but there it was. I was jogging the wooded back roads near Pine Hollow just after sunrise, the way I always did when I wanted some quiet before the rest of the town came alive. The mist still hung low over the ditches, and a light breeze tugged at the yellowing leaves of early fall. The pavement was cracked in places, wild grasses pushing their way through like nature's stubborn whisper. Then I saw him. He was tied to a metal fence post where the trees gave way to an overgrown lot that used to be a fruit stand years ago. The wooden structure had long since collapsed in on itself, with vines claiming its remains. The dog, a mix of something large and shaggy, maybe some Lab and Pyrenees, was curled into himself. So still, I thought he might be gone. There was a rusty chain looped tight around his neck, clipped to the post like someone had meant for him to stay a while. His fur was matted with dirt and burrs, tangled in patches where you could tell he had tried to bite or scratch at something. But then his eyes opened. Big, sad eyes, brown like tree bark after rain. And he didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just looked at me. I froze. I looked around, expecting maybe to see a car parked nearby or someone calling out for a lost dog. But it was just me and the breeze and this silent, forgotten animal. I took a step closer. He didn't flinch. A few more steps, then I knelt, my heart thudding louder than my feet ever had on the pavement. "Hey there," I said gently. "Hey, buddy." He watched me, blinking slowly. I didn't carry much on my runs, just a small hip pouch with my phone and an energy bar. I tore the wrapper and held out a piece, hand flat. He sniffed, barely moved, then slowly opened his mouth and took the food like it was some long-lost memory. It wasn't hunger that scared me. It was the way he didn't even hesitate, like the part of him that knew to be cautious had been worn away. Okay, we're gonna fix this," I muttered, pulling out my phone. I dialed my friend Lacey, who worked at the animal shelter, and prayed she wasn't screening her calls this early. She picked up on the second ring. "Addie, you okay?" "Yeah," I said, then lowered my voice. "Sort of. I found a dog. He's tied up off County Road 6 just past the old Lambert fruit stand. Can you come?" "Tied up?" she repeated, already shifting into work mode. I could hear her keys jingling in the background. "I'm coming. Don't move him. I'll be there in 10. We hung up and I sat down on the ground next to him, careful not to touch the chain. He leaned his head down again, this time onto his front paws, as though he were ready to sleep for 100 years. A few minutes passed like that. Then I noticed something near his side. A bright spot in the mess of brown and gray. I leaned forward. It was a toy. A rubber chew toy, shaped like a bone, bright blue and speckled with little cartoon paw prints. Someone had left it there, right within reach. Clean. New. The only thing in the scene that didn't look like it had been left to rot. The dog hadn't touched it. When Lacey arrived, she climbed out of her old Subaru with a canvas leash and some jerky treats. She knelt down beside me, examining the dog with practiced hands. "No tags," she said, brushing some leaves from his shoulder. "No collar either, just this chain. Whoever left him didn't want him found." "Then why the toy?" Lacey shook her head. "People are strange. Maybe they thought it was enough. Maybe it was guilt." She unclipped the chain with care, slipping her leash around the dog's neck. He didn't resist, just got up slowly, like every joint hurt, and stood next to her. "We'll bring him in," she said. "He'll need a full workup. You want to come?" I nodded. Of course I did. I couldn't just walk away. The shelter was only 15 minutes from the woods. A modest little place with a green roof and rows of kennels lined with hopeful eyes and wagging tails. Lacey brought the dog inside, guiding him into a quiet corner room where he wouldn't be overwhelmed by the others. We got his weight, took pictures, logged every detail into the system. No microchip, malnourished, dehydrated, but no broken bones, no obvious illness, just tired. Lacey looked at me. "He needs a name." I looked down at the blue toy, which I had slipped into my jacket pocket on impulse. I took it out and turned it over in my hands. "Toy," I said, before I even realized it. She smiled. "Toy. Okay." He stayed at the shelter for the next few days. I came back each afternoon after work. I'm a substitute teacher at Pine Hollow Elementary, so my schedule is loose enough to allow some flexibility. The kids are always full of energy and questions, and it helps take my mind off things. But that week, all I could think about was Toy. Toy walked in slow, unsure, but calm. I kept him leashed as I led him through the quiet halls, his nails clicking on the tile. When we stepped into the classroom, 22 little faces turned toward us in unison. A few gasps, one squeal, and then, "Miss Addie, is he real? Can we pet him? Is he magic?" I laughed and nodded. "His name is Toy. He's very gentle. But let's go slow, okay? One at a time." Toy sat beside me, eyes on the floor, tail still. I knelt and gave his ear a quick rub. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered. "They're friends." The first child came forward, a quiet girl named Emily who always brought a lunch of boiled eggs and string cheese and never raised her hand, but always knew the answer. She held out her hand the way I showed her, let Toy sniff, then gently stroked his head. He closed his eyes. Just for a moment. And that was all it took. The others followed, one by one. Tiny hands reaching out, gentle voices saying hello, asking if he liked snacks or had a favorite toy. "He has a toy," I said. "A blue one. He keeps it close." "Does he have a favorite color?" one boy asked, his backpack still on like he was ready to bolt at any moment. I smiled. "Maybe. What do you think it is?" Green, the boy said with a shrug. That's the color of grass. Toy sniffed at the boy's shoes, tail twitching once. He likes you, I said. After 15 minutes, I walked Toy back to the car and gave him a treat. He took it with slow care, then rested his head on the passenger seat the whole drive home. When we got back, I filled his water bowl and sat beside him on the kitchen floor, just listening to the wind through the screen door. The next morning, there was another note. This one was inside my mailbox, folded twice, no envelope. I saw you with him, thank you. I didn't know anyone would care. My hands shook a little as I read it. The handwriting matched the first note, slanted, clean, no signature. I looked around the street, but no one was there. Just the neighbor's cat stretched across a porch rail and an old man walking his pug down the opposite sidewalk. No cars I didn't recognize, no watchers. Still, I felt something, like a quiet breath on the back of my neck. I folded the note and slid it into the drawer where I kept the other one. I didn't tell Lacey this time. Toy watched me from the hallway, head tilted. It's okay, I said softly. You're safe. He padded over and leaned against my leg. The days settled into something like a routine. Walks in the morning, school, afternoons on the porch. Toy's fur started to grow back and cleaner and shinier. He walked with more confidence. Still no barking, not really. But he grumbled in his sleep sometimes, little soft rumbles like distant thunder. One Saturday, I took him to the farmer's market in town. It was busy, but not loud. People milled about with paper bags of fresh bread and jams. Kids played tag between the booths. Toy stayed close, his leash looped loosely around my wrist. A woman at the honey stand leaned over and smiled. That's a beautiful dog. Thank you, I said. He's new to me. She nodded. Looks gentle. He is. Toy watched her, tail still. He always watched everyone. After we left the stand, I bought him a biscuit from a booth that sold homemade pet treats. He took it like it was made of gold. I laughed and knelt to adjust his collar. That's when I saw her. Across the plaza, near the pottery booth, a young woman stood half-hidden behind a row of tall sunflowers. She was wearing a light jacket despite the warmth, her hands in the pockets. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and she wore big sunglasses. She was watching us. I stood up slowly. Toy didn't seem to notice. But when I looked directly at her, she stepped back behind the booth and was gone. Later that night, I walked Toy around the block twice, heart a little tighter than usual. The street lamps buzzed softly, and the cicadas were louder than they should have been for early fall. Toy sniffed at each fence post like he was checking for changes. There was nothing in the mailbox. That week, Toy barked again. It was just before dawn. I was in the kitchen making tea, the sun not quite up, when I heard the sound. Not sharp, not panicked, just one deep bark from the front room. I rushed in. Toy stood by the window, staring out. There was no one there. The street was empty. But the blue toy had moved. It had been by his water bowl the night before. Now it was near the door. I picked it up, frowning. Did you do that? Toy didn't look at me, just stared at the window, ears perked. I stood beside him, waited. Eventually, he relaxed. I gave him a treat, and the rest of the day went on like normal. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the note, the woman, the toy. What if someone had been in the yard? What if someone had moved it? I checked the locks 3 times. The next morning, there was a third note. This one was taped to the fence in the backyard. It was raining. I just wanted him to be happy. You're doing that. I won't come again. I left the note on the counter. I didn't know what to think. Toy pressed his head into my side. I pressed mine back. Toy didn't like the vet's office. He didn't shake or growl or show his teeth, but his whole body became heavier, like the air got thicker around him the moment we stepped through the door. He leaned his weight into my leg while we waited, head low, eyes darting to every movement from the reception desk to the corner where a parrot in a cage squawked lazily at no one. It's okay, I whispered, rubbing the back of his neck. We're just here to make sure you're good and healthy. Dr. Halpern had a gentle way about her, middle-aged with steel-gray hair pulled into a bun and eyes that squinted kindly behind gold-rimmed glasses. She didn't push Toy to move too fast. Let him sniff the exam table. Let him sit beside me until he was ready to climb up. He never made a sound, not even when she checked his teeth or touched his paws. He's doing well, she said as she removed her gloves. Still some joint stiffness and a little lingering muscle loss on the left side, probably from laying on it too long while he was tied up. But overall, he's recovering beautifully. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Toy blinked at her, then turned to press his head into my arm. I scratched his ear. Thank you. That means a lot. Dr. Halpern hesitated. Has he shown any signs of anxiety? You know, behaviors like hiding during storms, jumping at loud noises, barking suddenly? I nodded. Some. He doesn't like thunder. He watches the windows a lot. He's quiet, but he notices everything. And a couple times, I thought maybe someone had been near the house. We've found notes. Her eyebrows lifted. Notes? From whoever left him. I think they've been watching us. She folded her hands. Do you feel unsafe? No, not exactly. It's more sad, I guess. Like someone is trying to let go but keeps coming back. Toy exhaled a slow breath. I think they loved him, I added. But something happened. The drive home was quiet. The wind whistled faintly through a cracked back window, and Toy rested his head on the armrest, eyes half closed. The sky had that soft white haze it got before snow. Too early in the season for it to stick, but not too early for the wind to bite. When we got back, Toy went to the front door before I even took my keys out. He sniffed the bottom edge, then looked back at me. There was nothing outside. No note. No footprints. But I crouched next to him anyway. You still smell them? I asked. He blinked once. That night, I found myself rereading the last note again. I just wanted him to be happy. Who were they? Why couldn't they stay? What had happened that they left him with nothing but a toy and a rusted chain? I didn't sleep well. I kept dreaming of chains wrapped around trees and voices I couldn't see whispering through tall grass. Over the next few days, I distracted myself by getting involved with the town's holiday drive. Pine Hollow always did a big collection for winter supplies: coats, canned goods, dog food, even old toys. I volunteered to help organize donations in the community center. Toy came with me. He liked the center. Big windows, quiet echoes, and most of all, kids who wanted to pet him. He'd sit near the donation bin and let them scratch behind his ears while I sorted boots and scarves. One afternoon, while Toy rested on a sleeping bag someone had dropped off, a man came in carrying 2 boxes of old kitchen supplies. He was tall, wiry, with a deep tan and silver hair under a ball cap. His eyes lingered on Toy a little longer than I liked. "Good dog," he said casually. "Yeah," I replied. "He's sweet." He nodded, but didn't look away. "You from around here?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Nearby, up near Mill Bridge. Don't get into town much. Just heard about the drive." He set the boxes down and tipped his hat to me, then left. I watched his truck pull away and vanish into the trees. Toy sat up slowly and stared at the door long after it had closed. "Do you know him?" I asked softly. Toy didn't move. I told Lacey about it later when we were sorting through extra fleece blankets at the shelter. "Do you think it was him?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe, but something felt strange, like Toy recognized him." She shrugged. "Could be he just smells familiar? People carry a lot with them, even if they don't realize it." "Should I be worried?" She looked at me a long moment. "Do you feel worried?" I nodded slowly. "A little." "Then trust that. Keep your doors locked, but don't jump to conclusions. There are a lot of good people out there who've made bad choices. That doesn't mean they're dangerous." Toy stayed closer to me after that. He started sleeping right by the bed instead of across the room. He followed me from room to room, like a shadow with warm eyes. I didn't mind. I liked the sound of his nails on the hardwood, the quiet huff he gave when settling onto his blanket. One evening, I came back from the store to find the blue toy moved again. It was in the laundry room this time, next to the washing machine. I'd left it in the den. I didn't say anything, just walked over, picked it up, and looked at Toy. "Did you move it?" I asked. He stared back, then walked over and sat beside me. Another bark. Just one. Then silence. I put the toy back where it belonged. It snowed lightly that night. Just a dusting. Enough to coat the roofs and make the tree branches shimmer under the streetlights. I bundled up and took Toy for a walk around the block. And that's when I saw her again. The woman from the market. She stood at the far corner just outside the glow of the street lamp, arms crossed, eyes lowered. Toy saw her too. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stopped walking. I raised a hand. "Hey!" She flinched, turned, and ran. I didn't chase her, just watched until she vanished behind the Johnsons' old hedge. Toy whined softly, just once. When we got back, there was a fourth note under the doormat. "I miss him every day, but he doesn't need me anymore." The handwriting trembled more than the others. I sat on the couch, Toy curled against me, and stared at the note for a long time. That night, I dreamt of the woods, of a girl's voice calling out softly, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry," as she walked away from something in the trees. In the morning, I called Lacey. "I think I need to know who she is." "I figured you'd say that eventually." She paused. I heard typing. Then she said, "We got that anonymous intake form, remember? The one that was half filled when we first brought Toy in? Might be worth another look. It's not much, but there was a first name. No last. Just M. M. Emily? Emma? Emmeline?" I searched Facebook. Pine Hollow had a few women with E names. I looked for anyone who had posted lost pet notices. Nothing recent. But one name stood out. Emery Jacobs. She had no recent posts, just old photos. A girl in a high school hoodie with a big, shaggy dog beside her. The caption read, "Toy says hi from the creek." My heart stuttered. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed, "Hi. I think I have your dog." And I hit send. The message sat unread for a day and a half. I checked it constantly, refreshing the screen as if the app might blink and show a new response if I looked hard enough. But nothing came. No reply, no typing bubbles, just the small sent marker and the aching quiet of waiting. Toy didn't seem to notice my nerves. Or maybe he did and simply chose not to mirror them. He'd curl up beside me while I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a half-cold cup of tea, tail flicking slowly each time I sighed. He rested his chin on my foot and let the minutes pass. On the second night, I almost deleted the message. Maybe it was wrong of me to reach out. Maybe I should have left it alone. Let the past stay buried and the future move forward. But I didn't delete it. And then the next morning, there was a reply. "Where did you find him?" No greeting. No name. Just the question. I read it 4 times before responding. Tied to a post near County Road 6 about 2 months ago, he had a toy with him, a blue one. Another long pause. An hour passed. Then, that was mine. He was mine. I breathed out and felt Toy shift under the table. I typed carefully. "Do you want to talk?" A few minutes later, "Yes. Not online. Please." We arranged to meet that afternoon in the little gazebo behind the Pine Hollow Library. It was quiet there, tucked away behind a row of cedars, with benches and a walking path that wound down toward the creek. I told her I'd bring Toy, and she didn't object. When I pulled into the lot, the wind was blowing harder than I expected. Leaves skittered across the asphalt, and the first hints of real winter were beginning to press into the air. I opened the back door, and Toy hopped down with a soft grunt, his leash already clipped to his collar. He walked beside me with more purpose than usual, his ears tilted forward, his eyes scanning the path as we moved toward the gazebo. And then he stopped. She was already there, standing near the railing, back straight, arms wrapped around herself. She was younger than I expected, mid-20s maybe, and thinner. Her hair was down this time, a dull brown that caught the gray light, and her face was bare. No sunglasses, no coat. Just a threadbare sweater and jeans that didn't quite fit. When she saw us, her hands fell to her sides. Toy didn't bark, didn't pull. He simply looked at her for a long time and then, so slowly it was almost nothing, he stepped forward. "Hey boy," she whispered. He stopped in front of her and sat. She knelt to his level. "I missed you," she said. Her hands shook as she reached out. Toy let her touch his head. She cradled his face like he was a memory she didn't know how to hold. "I thought I saw you at the market," I said gently, "and again in the neighborhood." Emery nodded without looking up. "I didn't mean to scare you. You didn't scare me. I just couldn't believe it was him. He looked so good, better than he's looked in years. He's healing." She finally stood. Her eyes were rimmed red, but dry. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything. I never wanted to leave him like that." but I didn't have another choice. I said nothing. Let the silence hold space for her. My dad died 3 years ago, she continued. He was the one who got Toy for me when I was 17. We raised him together. After Dad passed, everything fell apart. My mom, she's never really been the same. And we lost the house. I tried to keep Toy with me, but the place I was staying wouldn't let me keep a dog his size. I thought I could find a friend to take him, but nothing worked out. I panicked. I couldn't bring him to a shelter. I was scared he'd be put down. So I left him where I thought someone might find him, near a place people still passed sometimes. I thought, maybe... She trailed off. He waited, I said. She nodded. I left the toy so he wouldn't be completely alone. I know that sounds dumb. It doesn't. She crouched again, kissed the top of Toy's head. He still carries it? Everywhere. We stood there a while, not speaking. Toy laid down on the wooden planks, head on his paws. I can't take him back, she said finally. Even if I wanted to. I'm not settled. I barely have a job. I sleep on a friend's couch. I can't give him what he has now. I looked down. He's happy, but I think he still remembers you. I hope so. There was something too fragile in her expression, like she was asking for something she didn't think she deserved. If you want, I said carefully, you can come visit. No pressure, no promises. Just if you want to see him now and then. Her breath hitched. I'd like that, she said. Only if you're okay with it. I am. We exchanged numbers. She didn't ask for photos, just thanked me 3 more times and waved gently at Toy as I turned to leave. He looked back once as we walked away. That night, she texted me, "Thank you for being kind." I replied, "He's easy to love." Toy's routine didn't change much. He still waited by the front door for walks, still nudged his food bowl at exactly 7:30, but something was lighter in him after the meeting. Like a door had closed, gently instead of being slammed. He slept more soundly, wagged his tail more often. A few times a week, Emery texted me. Sometimes just a simple, "How is he today?" Sometimes a longer message about a memory she had. Swimming in the creek, Toy stealing her socks, the time he tried to bark at a deer and ran face first into a bush. I shared pictures, sent voice clips of his barks, even filmed a short video of him rolling on his back in the first real snowfall, legs kicking joyfully at the air. She never pushed for more. She came by once to see him, brought a new toy, a green rope tug, and sat in the yard with him for 20 minutes while I prepped dinner. They didn't do much, just sat. But Toy laid his head in her lap before she left. Afterward, I found the rope toy beside the blue one in his bed. Christmas crept up faster than I expected. The town hung lights from every telephone pole. The community center turned into a maze of red and gold. Toy and I walked the streets each evening, watching the windows fill with candles and pine garlands. I bought him a new bed, the kind with raised sides and a memory foam cushion. I wrapped it, put a bow on top, and left it under the tree. I don't know if he knew it was for him, but he sniffed it often, tail twitching. Emery dropped off a gift, too. A knit scarf for him, soft gray with a little paw print tag sewn near the end. She didn't stay long, just smiled, wished us a good holiday, and left before the sun dipped too low. On Christmas morning, I opened the bed and let Toy climb in. He sighed, rolled onto his side and closed his eyes. The blue toy was under one paw, the green one under the other. And I sat beside him, letting the morning pass slow and warm. We weren't at the end, not even close. Toy's first winter in. "Hey, boy," she whispered. He stopped in front of her and sat. She knelt to his level. "I missed you," she said. Her hands shook as she reached out. Toy let her touch his head. She cradled his face like he was a memory she didn't know how to hold. "I thought I saw you at the market," I said gently. "And again in the neighborhood." Emery nodded without looking up. "I didn't mean to scare you." "You didn't scare me. I just couldn't believe it was him. He looked so good. Better than he's looked in years. He's healing." She finally stood. Her eyes were rimmed red, but dry. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything. I never wanted to leave him like that, but I didn't have another choice." I said nothing. Let the silence hold space for her. "My dad died 3 years ago," she continued. "He was the one who got Toy for me when I was 17. We raised him together. After Dad passed, everything fell apart. My mom, she's never really been the same. And we lost the house. I tried to keep Toy with me, but the place I was staying wouldn't let me keep a dog his size. I thought I could find a friend to take him, but nothing worked out. I panicked. I couldn't bring him to a shelter. I was scared he'd be put down. So I left him where I thought someone might find him. Near a place people still passed sometimes. I thought, maybe..." She trailed off. "He waited," I said. She nodded. "I left the toy so he wouldn't be completely alone. I know that sounds dumb. It doesn't." She crouched again, kissed the top of Toy's head. "He still carries it?" "Everywhere." We stood there a while, not speaking. Toy laid down on the wooden planks, head on his paws. "I can't take him back," she said finally. "Even if I wanted to. I'm not settled. I barely have a job. I sleep on a friend's couch. I can't give him what he has now." I looked down. "He's happy. But I think he still remembers you." "I hope so." There was something too fragile in her expression, like she was asking for something she didn't think she deserved. "If you want," I said carefully, "you can come visit. No pressure. No promises. Just if you want to see him now and then." Her breath hitched. "I'd like that," she said. "Only if you're okay with it." "I am." We exchanged numbers. She didn't ask for photos, just thanked me 3 more times and waved gently at Toy as I turned to leave. He looked back once as we walked away. That night, she texted me, "Thank you for being kind." I replied, "He's easy to love." Toy's routine didn't change much. He still waited by the front door for walks, still nudged his food bowl at exactly 7:30. But something was lighter in him after the meeting, like a door had closed, gently, instead of being slammed. He slept more soundly, wagged his tail more often. A few times a week, Emery texted me. Sometimes just a simple, "How is he today?" Sometimes a longer message about a memory she had. Swimming in the creek, Toy stealing her socks, the time he tried to bark at a deer and ran face first into a bush. I shared pictures, sent voice clips of his barks, even filmed a short video of him rolling on his back in the first real snowfall, legs kicking joyfully at the air. She never pushed for more. She came by once to see him, brought a new toy, a green rope tug, and sat in the yard with him for 20 minutes while I prepped dinner. They didn't do much, just sat. But Toy laid his head in her lap before she left. The house was soft and quiet. Snow fell often, but never harshly, coating the pine trees and rooftops with a peaceful hush that seemed to wrap the neighborhood in cotton. The sky stayed pale most days, and the streets were empty more often than not. Everyone moved a little slower. So did we. Toy didn't like the cold much, though he tolerated it. On days when the wind cut too sharply, he'd press his nose against the bottom of the front door and wait, tail still, until I got the message and left the leash on the hook. We made up for the missed walks with long hours lying on the rug in the sunbeam that reached across the living room floor around noon. He'd nap there with his paws tucked under him, ears twitching now and then at passing cars or the clink of my mug against the table. The new year began without fanfare. No parties, no fireworks, just a quiet evening of soup on the stove and a candle flickering by the window. I sat cross-legged on the couch in my thickest socks, and Toy laid his head on my knee like he'd done it 1,000 times before. I told him the things I hoped would be true by the time we got to next winter, that I'd take on a full-time position at the school, that we'd try the lake trail in spring, that maybe I'd paint the kitchen, finally. I told him he'd still be here for it all. He listened the way he always did, still and slow, like he understood every word. A few days into January, Lacey called. "You busy this weekend?" she asked. "I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" She sighed. "We had a heater go out in one of the dog rooms. We're over capacity, and the pups in that section need somewhere warm to go for a few days while we fix it. Can you foster one? Just short term." I looked at Toy, who was lying upside down on his back, paws twitching in a dream. "I think we can manage," I said. When I picked up the foster, Toy waited in the back seat, head out the window, breath fogging the glass. Lacey brought out a scrappy little mutt with wild tufts of fur and a crooked tail. His name was Dodger, and he was maybe 6 months old, all energy and clumsy feet. Toy was not impressed at first. Dodger bounded into the house like a rocket, tripping over the rug, skidding into the table leg, and immediately peeing a little in excitement. I cleaned it up while Toy stood motionless in the hallway, staring at this whirlwind of noise and fur like he wasn't sure if it was alive or just some trick I'd pulled on him. But Toy didn't growl. He didn't even walk away. He just watched. Over the next 2 days, Dodger made it his mission to befriend him. He'd bring Toy scraps of rope, half-chewed balls, a sock he'd dragged from the laundry basket. He'd bounce up to him and drop things at his paws, tail wagging so hard it slapped the walls. Toy accepted them silently, sniffed each one, then moved it aside with a paw. On the 3rd day, I came downstairs to find both dogs curled up in Toy's bed, side by side. The blue toy rested between them. The green one was on the floor, as if someone had tried to share but misjudged the space. Dodger stayed for 5 days. When Lacey came to pick him up, she bent down to say goodbye to Toy. "You're a good host," she said, rubbing behind his ears. Toy didn't move, just blinked slowly and watched as Dodger climbed into the shelter van. After the door closed, he stood at the window for a while. That night, he slept near the door. I wondered if he missed the chaos, or just the company. Later that week, Emery texted, "Do you think Toy would mind going for a walk with me? Just me and him?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust her. I did, more and more. But because the idea of him being out of my sight now gave me a pang I didn't quite know how to name. He wasn't a possession, but he had become my compass. The idea of handing over the leash felt like letting go of something fragile. Still, I said yes. She arrived bundled in a scarf and gloves. Toy greeted her at the door, tail wagging once. I clipped the leash into her hand. "I'll just take him around the block," she promised. I nodded. "Take your time." They were gone 30 minutes. When they came back, Emery looked lighter. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her eyes shone just a little brighter. Toy padded in behind her and went straight to the water bowl. "He sniffed everything," she said. "Showed me a tree he liked. Sat down halfway through like he wanted to watch the wind." "That sounds about right." "Thank you for letting me." "Of course." The days kept passing, slow and steady. Snow came and melted, then came again. Toy learned to enjoy a short nap in the sun every time it appeared, even if the sky closed back over an hour later. I watched his coat thicken and shine, watched the muscles return to his legs. He still limped slightly on cold mornings, but the stiffness eased with time. Sometimes we walked to the edge of the creek where the bridge had been rebuilt after a storm years back. He liked to sit there, not to sniff or search, just to look. Like the sound of the moving water reminded him that time still passed, whether we noticed or not. One evening I brought a sketch pad with me. I'd started drawing again. Nothing fancy, just quiet things. Tree branches, empty benches, the curve of Toy's back while he slept. As I sketched, Toy laid at my feet, chin on his paws, and the blue toy beside him like always. A family passed by on the trail behind us, a couple with 2 kids bundled up in bright puffy coats. The smaller child pointed. "Look, Mommy, that dog's hugging his toy." I smiled. Toy didn't move. As February began, Emery's texts grew more frequent. She was picking up more shifts at a bakery in town, helping her friend pay rent, looking into part-time classes at the community college. She never asked for money, never hinted at needing help. But I knew she was building something. Once she asked if Toy remembered music. I told her he liked soft guitar the best. She replied, "Duh. That was my dad's favorite. He used to play on the porch while Toy laid in his lap." She started joining us on walks more often. Not every day, not even every week, but enough that Toy began to expect her voice from around corners. The first time she came inside the house, he led her straight to the toy basket and nudged both toys toward her. "I think he wants you to pick," I said. She laughed, chose the blue one. Toy wagged his tail and followed her to the couch. That night, she stayed for tea. We talked about everything and nothing. About books we'd never finished. About the way the sky looked more purple in February. About how people rarely see themselves clearly until someone else holds up a mirror. When she left, Toy walked her to the door and waited until her taillights faded down the road. As spring approached, Toy grew restless. He wanted longer walks, more time outside. He lay by the back door when it rained, watching the clouds like he was waiting for something. I signed him up for a small obedience class at the edge of town. Not because he needed it, really, but because I thought the interaction might be good for him, and for me. He did well, sat when asked, came when called. He ignored the barking poodle who tried to rile him up. The instructor laughed. "He's the calmest dog I've seen in years." I smiled. "He's been through a lot." Maybe that's why. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who've learned the most. Toy earned a little certificate. I taped it to the fridge. Emery took a picture of it the next time she visited. "That's my boy," she whispered. I looked at her. She caught my expression. "Sorry," she added. "Old habits." "It's okay." He remembers. One afternoon in March, we took a walk farther than usual, down the winding path past the fire station and into the grove where wildflowers were beginning to bloom early. Toy pulled us toward a spot near a broken-down bench, tail low, steps slow. "This was where we used to come with Dad," Emery said, eyes distant. Toy sat, looked up at her. She crouched beside him, touched his fur. "I'm glad he ended up with you," she told me. "He could have been lost forever, but you brought him back." I shook my head. He did that all on his own. The first time Toy let out a full, loud bark, it startled the both of us. It happened one clear morning in April. I was weeding the garden bed near the porch, gloves covered in dirt, sweat dripping down my neck, when a squirrel darted across the lawn and leapt onto the fence. Toy had been watching from his usual spot in the shade. He stood up slowly, tail stiff, eyes following the blur of movement. Then, out of nowhere, a deep bark burst from his chest. Loud. Sure. One bark. He startled himself, I think. Stepped back a little and looked at me like he wasn't sure where the sound had come from. I dropped my trowel and laughed. "Well, look who's finding his voice." He wagged his tail once and then returned to his shady spot, but not before glancing at the fence one last time. That was the beginning. After that, he barked more. Not often. Not like the frantic neighborhood dogs that wailed at mail trucks or passing cars. Toy's barks were measured. A statement. One or two at a time, always with purpose. When the garbage bins were left too close to the porch. When a raccoon tried to tip over the compost. When a boy on a skateboard zipped past too close for comfort. He never barked at Emery. By now, she came by nearly every other day, sometimes just for a few minutes on her lunch break, sometimes in the evenings, when we'd all sit on the porch with cold drinks and let the quiet settle around us. She still didn't have a permanent place, but she was working steadily at the bakery and had picked up tutoring hours at the library. She'd found a rhythm. Toy responded to her like he'd never been apart from her. But he didn't cling. He didn't change when she left. He seemed to know the balance somehow, that she was part of his past and still welcome in the present, but not everything. One Friday afternoon, she came over with a small box. "I found this in storage," she said, holding it out to me. "Thought maybe you'd want it, for him." I opened it slowly. Inside were photos, old ones. Toy as a puppy, clumsy and wide-eyed, with oversized ears and a tail too long for his body. Emery beside him, younger, laughing. Her dad, tall, mustached, wearing flannel in every photo, with a guitar slung over his shoulder and Toy curled at his feet. At the bottom was a collar, faded blue, the name stitched in worn white thread, Toy. My chest tightened. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "I want him to have it." I gently slipped off his current collar and replaced it with the blue one. He blinked at me, licked my hand once, then wandered back to his blanket. Emery sat beside me on the steps. "I used to think I ruined him," she said quietly. "You didn't." "I left him, alone. That's not nothing." "No, but he forgives you." She pulled her knees to her chest. "I just wanted to do one good thing. Leaving the toy, that was my last shot. I hoped, maybe if someone found him, they'd see it." They'd know he mattered to someone. I did see it, I said. It's the first thing I noticed. The wind picked up. Blossoms from the pear tree floated down and scattered across the yard like confetti. Funny, she said. I always thought he'd outlive me. He was my constant. He still is, in a way. She smiled. Now I think maybe he was meant to help us both. The days grew warmer. Toy spent more time outside, lounging in the patch of sun that crept across the yard around 10. He and I started walking the longer trail through Pine Hollow Park again, the one that looped around the lake and dipped beneath tall oaks. He walked with a steady gait now, less cautious. Sometimes he'd pause to sniff a patch of grass or watch a butterfly drift by, but mostly, he walked beside me in quiet company. We met other dogs sometimes. A golden retriever named Benny who barked too much. A beagle mix named Juniper who liked to roll in mud. Toy never joined in their games, but he didn't shy away either. He watched, took them in. Once he let Juniper rest her chin on his shoulder while her owner tied a shoe. It was enough. At home, Toy developed a new habit. Every evening, just before dinner, he'd nudge the blue toy into the hallway. Leave it there like a marker, facing the front door. Then he'd return to the kitchen and wait. It became routine. Toy, the wait. The first time Emery noticed, she frowned. Do you think he's expecting someone? Maybe, I said. Or maybe it's his way of saying, this place is safe. She nodded, like putting a flag down. That, or he wants someone to trip over it. That made her laugh. One night, thunder rolled in unexpected. The first clap hit just as I turned off the porch light. Toy jumped. Not far, but enough to send his water bowl skidding. I moved to calm him, but he'd already gone to the laundry room, the quietest space in the house, and curled up behind the door. I sat with him back against the dryer, whispering nonsense until the worst of it passed. You're not alone, I said more than once. He didn't make a sound, but after a while he rested his head on my thigh. Spring brought color back to everything. Tulips bloomed along the neighbor's walkway. The maple out front started pushing out new leaves, and the scent of wet grass clung to the morning air. I started keeping the back door open on warm afternoons, letting Toy wander in and out as he pleased. He mostly stayed in the yard, but sometimes he'd explore the hedges or lay in the patch of dandelions by the fence. One afternoon, I watched him from the window. He walked to the far corner of the yard, looked up at the sky, and barked once. I stepped outside. He turned, wagged his tail, and waited. I followed. There was nothing unusual in the corner, just a few stones and weeds. But Toy pawed at the ground gently, then sat beside the spot and looked up at me. I crouched. What is it? He leaned against my arm. The next day, Emery visited again. Toy met her at the door, blue toy in his mouth. He brought it to me this time, she said, eyes wide. I nodded. He's full of surprises. We took him for a walk around the block. Emery held the leash this time. I walked beside her, hands in my jacket. He's different, she said after a while. He still feels like my dog, but he feels bigger now, like he's more than what he used to be. He's had to be. She nodded. Do you ever wonder if animals know more than we give them credit for? All the time. We reached the old oak near the corner. Toy stopped, sat, looked up at the tree. What's here? Emery asked. This was where he barked the first time, I said. At a squirrel? She smiled. I like that. By May, Toy had grown used to being recognized around town. The kids at the school called him Mayor Toy. He'd accompany me once a week when I volunteered at the library, curling up near the children's section while I read aloud. He never barked indoors, just lifted his head now and then to show he was listening. One of the librarians framed a picture of him for the front desk. "Every good library needs a quiet soul," she said. He made friends with the mailman, learned which houses had dogs behind fences, knew the shortcut through the alley that led to the park. He knew home. One morning, Emery called. "I have news," she said. "Can I come by?" She arrived with a paper bag of muffins and a letter in her hand. "I got accepted," she said. "Community college. Part-time program in animal sciences. Starts in August." "That's amazing," I said. "Congratulations." "I'm scared," she admitted, "but excited too." Toy came over, nudged her hand. "I want to learn how to help more animals," she said, kneeling to stroke his head. "Like you helped him. I think you're already on your way." She stayed for dinner. We ate on the porch while Toy dozed between us. As the sun dipped low, she said, "I think he was never meant to be just one person's dog." I looked at her. Maybe he's meant to be shared, to remind people of patience, of second chances. Toy lifted his head, looked at us both, and blinked. I reached down, scratched behind his ear. He's good at that. The sky faded to soft blue. A breeze stirred the chimes. And Toy, quiet as ever, stood and walked inside, the blue toy in his mouth. Toy started waking up earlier in the summer. Every day around 6:30, just as the first band of sunlight touched the kitchen floor, he'd rise from his bed with a soft grunt and walk to the window. He'd sit there, watching the street, ears flicking gently at birdsong and the occasional jogger. I learned to expect the rhythm of his day before my own. If I wasn't up yet, he'd wait. Never pawed at the door, never barked. But I always knew when it was time. We'd walk slowly through the neighborhood while it was still quiet. Toy never liked rushing. He took time to sniff the same bush every morning and pause at the fire hydrant 2 houses down like it told him something new each day. The baker's cat, Butter, would sit on the porch and blink at us, tail curling around her legs. Toy never chased her. He'd just nod in her direction and continue on. By the time we got home, the town would be waking up. The hum of air conditioners starting, the buzz of someone mowing early. He'd curl back into his bed or stretch out on the rugs while I made coffee and prepped for school. Even on days I didn't have class, I still kept the habit. There was something grounding about that slow start, that shared silence. Emery came by more often now. She brought her course catalogs and books, sometimes studying on the porch while Toy slept beside her. She'd ask me questions about biology terms or what certain dog behaviors meant. She was still working at the bakery, but had picked up shadow hours at the vet's clinic 2 mornings a week. She asked me once while flipping through a notebook if I ever thought about what Toy must think of all this. Of us, she clarified. Of how we orbit around him now. How everything's shifted since he came back. I looked at Toy, curled in his bed, blue toy under one paw, tail twitching in sleep. I think he sees us as necessary, I said. Not in the needy way, more like how trees need light, like we help him stay where he's supposed to be. She smiled, tapping her pen. Maybe he helps us stay there too. In July, Toy had his first trip to the lake. We drove out early, taking the back roads through tall grasses and stretches of farmland, past barns with fading red paint and fences in need of repair. The lake was about 30 minutes away, tucked behind a grove of pine and birch, with a small public dock and a gentle slope of beach. He was cautious at first. Water had never been his favorite. But he walked close, sniffed the edge, and dipped one paw in. I tossed a stick, not far, and he looked at me like I was out of my mind. "You don't have to," I laughed. "Just a suggestion." But Emery was already barefoot, wading knee-deep. She called to him once, and Toy, with a small shake of his head and a grumble low in his chest, stepped forward. The water only reached his belly, but he held still there for a while, panting, tail wagging under the surface like a slow metronome. He didn't swim. He didn't need to. He just stood beside Emery while the lake lapped gently around him. Back on shore, he rolled in the sand like a puppy, covered himself in wet dirt and tiny bits of grass. I hadn't seen him like that before. Not fully loose, not fully playful. We stayed until late afternoon. Emery brought sandwiches. I brought fruit and peanut butter biscuits for Toy. We ate slowly, legs stretched toward the water, Toy curled between us. "I didn't think I'd get days like this," she said quietly. "You will. More of them." She nodded. "He makes me feel like I'm allowed to be happy again." Toy rested his chin on her leg. In August, the first heat wave rolled in. The house stayed cool enough most days, but Toy didn't like the humidity. He'd lie sprawled in front of the fan, ears flapping slightly from the breeze, eyes half-lidded. I kept his water cold and the blinds drawn. We took walks only in the early mornings and after the sun dipped low. During one of those late walks, we passed a family sitting on their porch steps. A little girl ran up and stopped a few feet from Toy, eyes wide. "Can I pet him?" she asked. I nodded. "If he says yes." Toy stood still, let her approach. She touched his head gently, then hugged him without warning. He didn't flinch. "He smells like the woods," she said. I smiled. "He likes trees." After she skipped away, her father raised a hand in greeting. "Sweet dog." "He's one of a kind," I said. When September came, the air turned crisp again. I bought Toy a new blanket for his bed and started making soup again in the evenings. The school year started up, and I returned to the classroom, part-time now, but enough to feel useful. Toy adjusted to the new schedule quickly. He'd watch me gather my things in the morning, then walk me to the door like it was his job. I'd leave him with a peanut butter treat and a promise I'd be back by 3. Sometimes Emery would swing by midday to check on him. I'd come home to a scribbled note on the counter. Sat on the porch with Toy. He barked at a butterfly. Not sorry. She and I talked more, too. Not just about Toy. About everything. About how time moves differently when you start over. About how some people are like seasons. You wait for them, then blink and they're gone. But Toy wasn't like that. Toy was a constant. One afternoon, I came home to find Toy waiting at the front door with both toys in his mouth. He dropped them at my feet, looked up, and barked once. "What is it?" I asked. He turned and walked toward the back door. I followed. He led me outside, across the yard, and to the far corner again. The same one from the spring. He pawed once at the dirt, then sat. I crouched, brushed the surface. There, tucked just beneath the topsoil, was something small and plastic. I pulled it free. A third toy. Red. Worn smooth. Shaped like a bone. I looked at Toy. "You hid this?" He tilted his head. The toy smelled faintly of grass and dust, a piece of something older, something he'd buried long before we met. I cleaned it off, brought it inside, and placed it beside the other two. Toy watched me, then curled up in his bed. He didn't need it anymore. That week, Emery started classes. She called after her first day, breathless with nerves. "I sat in the front row," she said. "Didn't answer a single question, but I showed up. That's more than enough." "I kept thinking about Toy," she added. "How he found his way back. Made me think maybe I can too." "You already are." Fall settled in again, with cool mornings and early dusks. Toy's coat thickened. He grew slower, but not in a worrying way. Just older. Wiser. He still barked at squirrels, still laid with his toys, still followed me from room to room like a quiet guardian. And in those soft hours between sunset and night, we sat on the porch, listening to the world breathe. Together. Toy started doing something new in the middle of October. Just after dusk, when the light turned gray and the wind moved differently through the branches, he'd get up from wherever he was lying and walk slowly to the hallway. He'd nose the edge of the closet door until it clicked open, then sit down facing it. Sometimes he'd sit for just a minute, other times for half an hour. Always silent, still, watching. At first I thought he was reacting to a sound I couldn't hear, a creak of the house, a mouse behind the baseboards, something small. But he never sniffed or scratched, just watched, as though the space beyond the door held something more important than I understood. I sat with him once, turned on the light, and leaned against the opposite wall. Nothing inside but a stack of boxes, a winter coat, an old broom. He didn't look at me, just kept facing the closet. "Is there something in there?" I asked. Toy didn't move. Later I mentioned it to Emery. She frowned. "He used to do that as a puppy. After my dad passed, he'd sit in the hallway at night and just wait. I used to think maybe he was hoping he'd come back." "Do you think he still remembers?" "I think he remembers everything, but maybe he doesn't wait the same way anymore." After that, I started leaving the closet door open, just a little. Toy still visited it each evening, like a ritual, but over time he stayed less. Just a glance, a moment. Then he'd return to the living room or curl into his bed. Fall came in full color that year. The maple out front blazed gold and crimson. Leaves crunched underfoot during our morning walks, and the wind carried the smell of damp bark and wood smoke. Toy's pace slowed, just a little. He took more breaks during walks, sat longer when we paused at the park bench, but he was alert, watchful, content. The neighborhood kids began preparing for Halloween. Skeletons appeared on lawns. Orange lights draped over hedges. One house set up a fog machine that spooked Toy the first time we passed it. He stood still, staring at the low-rolling mist, ears forward. "It's not real," I told him, "just for show." He gave me a look that seemed to say, "I know." But still, we made our own decorations, paper bats and pumpkins cut from old construction paper, taped up in the windows. Emery came over with a small bag of candy and a goofy witch hat she tried to get Toy to wear. He tolerated it for 3 seconds, then sneezed and shook it off. "I'll take that as a no," she said, laughing. He trotted away with his blue toy and laid down beside the radiator. On Halloween night, I stayed home with Toy while Emery helped her classmates run a charity table at the community center. I left the porch light on and set out a bowl of candy with a note. I knew Toy wouldn't enjoy the noise, so we sat inside, lights low, fire crackling. A few kids knocked despite the sign. Toy lifted his head but didn't bark. Just watched them through the window. Later, Emery texted, "Hope Toy got some treats too." I replied with a photo of him curled up with all 3 toys. "Living the good life," she wrote back. In early November, we drove out to visit a small orchard on the edge of town. They were closing for the season, but still sold bags of late apples and warm cider. Toy stayed leashed at my side while I picked a few ripe ones from the last trees. A boy passed by with a plastic sword and an oversized hoodie. He stopped in front of Toy and stared. "Is he magic?" I smiled. "Some people think so." Toy sniffed the boy's hand, then sat. "He looks like he knows stuff," the boy said. I nodded. "He does." Back at the house, I baked a pie. The smell filled every corner. Toy hovered nearby, not begging, but present. When I cooled a slice on the windowsill, he laid beside it like he was guarding a treasure. Emery came by for dinner. We ate at the small table near the bay window, while Toy lay underfoot. "He smells like cinnamon," she said, rubbing his head. "He's been on pie patrol all afternoon." After dinner, she stayed longer than usual. We talked about holidays, about what winter might be like, about whether we should get Toy his own stocking. "Yes," she said instantly, "and it should be big." I grinned. Agreed. Later that night, I stood by the window while Toy dozed near the couch. Outside, the trees swayed, and the stars blinked cold in the black sky. I turned to see Toy watching me, head lifted, eyes steady. I walked over, sat beside him. He nudged the red toy toward me. "You haven't touched this one in weeks," I said. He rested his head on my knee. I held the toy for a moment, feeling the weight of it, the silence between us. Then I placed it gently on the floor, next to the other 2. "Whatever it means," I said quietly, "it's safe now." The next morning, Toy didn't go to the closet. Instead, he walked straight to the porch, sat at the door, and waited to watch the sun rise. That afternoon, Emery asked if we could take Toy to the old hiking trail she used to visit with her dad. "He loved it," she said. "Used to pack a thermos and sandwiches. Toy would run ahead and circle back every few feet like he was making sure we were keeping up. It was farther than our usual walks, but the weather was clear and the trail was mostly flat. We parked just before the path turned to gravel. Toy sniffed the air, tail twitching, eyes bright. "He remembers," Emery whispered. We walked slowly. The trees formed a canopy overhead, golden leaves drifting down with every breeze. Toy stayed close, moving deliberately, his body calm but purposeful. Halfway through, we reached a small clearing with a bench carved from old stone. Emery sat. Toy stood in front of her, looking up. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a photo. One of her and her dad, younger, sitting on this very bench. Toy as a puppy sprawled between them. "I brought this for him," she said. She showed it to Toy. He sniffed it gently, then laid down at her feet. We stayed there until the shadows grew longer. On the way back, Toy stopped near a small cluster of wildflowers. He sat, raised his head, and let out a single bark. Emery smiled through tears. "He's telling him we came back." At home, Toy drank water, stretched, and curled into his bed without fuss. He didn't wake during the night. That weekend, the first frost came. Toy stood in the yard, nose lifted to the silver air, each breath forming clouds. His paws crunched lightly on the grass. He turned in a slow circle, then sat by the back fence watching the horizon. I joined him with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. "You always know when the season changes," I murmured. He leaned against my leg. Inside, I placed 3 toys by his bed. He looked at them, then at me. No bark, just silence. A peaceful kind. Thanksgiving came quietly that year. The town was covered in a soft dusting of snow by the time the holiday arrived, and most of the houses on our block had swapped their fall garlands for strings of twinkling lights. Pine Hollow always felt smaller in the winter, like the snow pulled the edges of it in tighter, made the roads shorter, the spaces between neighbors thinner. Toy noticed the change in the air before I did. He started waking later, stretching slower, lying longer in the sunbeam that crept across the kitchen floor. Emery spent the holiday with us. She brought a pie, one she had baked herself at the bakery during her shift the night before. It was slightly overcooked on one edge, but the crust was flaky and warm, and we ate it by the fire with slices of cheese and mugs of cider. Toy rested at our feet with his blue toy, dozing between us like he belonged in that exact spot and had never been anywhere else. After dinner, we sat on the floor and sorted through old photos again. Some of Emery, some of her dad, some of Toy as a puppy. She'd found a few more tucked into a drawer at her friend's house, places she'd forgotten they'd stored things after the house was sold. In one of them, Toy was running across a field, his ears flying back, tongue out, joy frozen in the image. "I don't even remember where this was," she said. "I think he does," I said, and Toy lifted his head, just slightly, as if to acknowledge the moment. December arrived in a rush of errands and cold snaps. I bought Toy a new jacket, not that he loved wearing it, but it helped on the bitter mornings. He tolerated it better if I made a big fuss over him while I strapped it on, like he understood that praise made things more bearable. The neighborhood kids started rehearsing for the town's winter recital, and one day after school, a few of them came by to drop off hand-drawn holiday cards. They'd made one for Toy, too, a crayon sketch of a big, happy dog with 3 toys by his paws and a gold star overhead. "He's famous," Emery said when I showed her. "He's not just famous," I said. "He's adored." Snow kept falling. Toy's walks grew shorter again. He still moved with intention, still led me to his favorite corners of the trail, but he paused more often, rested more between steps. One afternoon, halfway through our loop, he sat in the middle of the sidewalk and looked up at me, not with distress, just quiet understanding. I sat beside him until he was ready. Lacey came by one evening to drop off donations for the shelter's holiday drive. She knelt by Toy with a blanket in hand, something soft and blue. "For the most important foster I ever had," she said. Toy nudged his nose into the blanket, then lay down on it like he'd always known it was his. "You've come a long way," she whispered. He blinked at her, slow and calm. Emery helped me put up decorations the next day. We wrapped the banister in garland, set out candles, and hung Toy's stocking from the mantel. Inside, we tucked a handful of treats, a small rope toy, and a photo of him sitting in front of the fireplace last year. When we finished, she sat beside him and kissed the top of his head. "You're a legend," she whispered. That night, Toy didn't go to the closet. He went to the hallway instead and sat facing the door. Not the front door, the one to the back porch. He sat there a long time, head lifted like he was listening for something distant. I joined him eventually. Outside, the moon was full. The trees cast long shadows over the snow, and everything looked silver. "You waiting on someone?" I asked softly. He didn't turn his head. We stayed like that until the wind picked up, and I coaxed him back to bed. Christmas Eve was quiet. Emery stayed late. We made pasta and opened one gift each. She gave me a framed photo of the 3 toys in a neat row, taken from above. I gave her a pendant in the shape of a paw print with a small blue gem in the center. "He gave you back a part of yourself," I said. "I thought you should have something that reminded you." She didn't speak, just hugged me, hard. Toy watched us, ears perked. On Christmas morning, I found him lying in the hallway again, his blue toy beside him, the other 2 close by. He raised his head when I approached, but didn't move. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, kneeling down. His tail twitched. Once. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" He blinked, pressed his nose into my palm. We stayed there a while. Later, we walked the shortest loop just around the block. He sniffed the corner post, paused by the mailbox, and sat down to watch a cardinal hop across the sidewalk. That night, we sat by the fire again. Toy rested his head on Emery's leg. She stroked his ear slowly, rhythmically. "He feels slower," she said. "Not tired, just settled." "Yeah." I reached for the blue toy, handed it to her. "He chose this, the day I found him." She turned it over in her hands. "It's always been his anchor," she said, "even before." We stayed until the fire dimmed. Toy slept soundly that night. No movement, no dreams. In the morning, he didn't get up. He was breathing, slow and deep, but he didn't rise to meet me at the stairs. I knelt beside his bed, placed a hand on his chest, and whispered his name. He opened one eye, gave a soft huff, closed it again. I sat with him, heart held gently between memory and ache. Emery came as soon as I called. She knelt beside him too. "He's not in pain," she said, "just tired." We stayed with him all day, took turns brushing his fur, reading aloud, playing soft music. He didn't eat much, didn't drink. That night, we laid him on the blue blanket Lacey had brought. The toys were tucked around him, the way he always liked them. He watched us with calm eyes, blinking, breathing. The wind blew outside. In the morning, the house was still. Toy was still. I didn't cry at first. Neither did Emery. We sat with him, hands on his side, whispering things he already knew. "You were loved," I said, "every day." "You made us better," she whispered. "You gave us back to ourselves." We wrapped him gently, carried him to the spot by the old pear tree in the backyard, where the sun hit just right in the mornings. Lacey came. So did a few neighbors, even the librarian from town. No big speeches, just hands on shoulders, nods of respect. We buried him with the blue toy. The other 2 stayed inside, resting on his bed. The house felt quieter after, but not empty. The next morning, I woke up early, out of habit. I made coffee, then walked to the back porch. The sun was rising. Light spread over the yard, slow and gold. I sat in the chair where he used to nap. Emery joined me 10 minutes later, hair still damp from the shower. "He would have loved this morning," she said. "He's still here," I said. She nodded. "I feel him." We didn't speak for a while. Later that day, I found the red toy moved, just slightly, closer to the window. I left it there. Every morning I found one of the toys in a different place. I never saw how it got there, but I always smiled and said good morning, like he never left at all.